The funny thing about terror is how quietly it arrives. It doesn't burst in with a scream, it slips in like a whisper of frost on a summer night. For me, that whisper started a few weeks ago, but the full bone-chilling cold didn't hit until I found the diary. My name is Vivian, and until very recently, I believed I had a life worth envying. I've been married to Michael for 7 years. 7 years of what I thought was unwavering partnership. We had the quintessential suburban dream, a beautiful 3-bedroom house on a quiet cul-de-sac, 2 golden retrievers, and comfortable, stable careers. Michael is an accountant, meticulous, organized, almost painfully reliable. That reliability, I realize now, was the perfect mask for a monster. Things weren't always perfect, of course. Money had been tight the last few years. Michael's investments hadn't performed well, and my salary, while decent, couldn't cover the mounting bills alone. He started getting withdrawn, spending hours locked in his study, claiming to be fixing the financials. I assumed it was stress. I offered to help, to downsize, but he always waved me off with the same dismissive phrase, "I've got it handled, honey. Don't you worry your pretty little head." The first real change I noticed was in the way he looked at me. It wasn't love or even frustration. It was calculation, like he was assessing my worth, or perhaps my utility. I started getting these odd accidents around the house. A loose floorboard near the top of the stairs that wasn't loose before a sudden, unexplained failure of the heating system during the coldest week of the year, forcing us to sleep under layers of blankets in the freezing house every time. Michael was the one to fix it, apologizing profusely for the inconvenience. Then came the insurance. About 6 months ago, Michael insisted we update our life insurance policies. He said it was just good fiscal planning, especially with the investment losses. He tripled the amount, making me the sole beneficiary of his policy, and of course, making himself the sole beneficiary of mine. "Just peace of mind, Viv," he'd said, signing the papers with a flourish. "If anything ever happens to either of us, the other is set for life. You deserve that security." I signed without reading the fine print. Why wouldn't I trust my husband? The diary. I found it last Tuesday. Michael was out of town on a supposed business trip. I was cleaning his study, a task he usually guarded jealously, claiming I would mess up his filing system. But I'd spilt coffee on his desk and needed to retrieve some documents before the stain, set hidden behind a stack of boring tax ledgers, I saw it. A small, black, leather-bound book, the kind you'd see in a vintage shop. It looked utterly out of place amongst the spreadsheets and calculators. Curiosity, the most dangerous human impulse, won out. I picked it up. It wasn't locked. The first page was blank, but the second page had a date written neatly at the top. March 14th. The handwriting was Michael's, the same precise accountant script he used for grocery lists. But the content, it was a complete stranger speaking. "The policy is finalized, $3 million, tax-free. The debt will be cleared and I can finally start over. V is too trusting. She signed everything without a glance. The only variable now is the execution. It must look natural. I cannot be implicated." I read the sentence 3 times. My mind was screaming, but my body was paralyzed. 3 million V execution. I slammed the book shut, my heart hammering against my ribs. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was a fictional story he was writing, a sick psychological thriller. Michael had a dry sense of humor, perhaps a little morbid, but planning an execution? I forced myself to open it again, my eyes wide and dry. I had to know, fiction or reality. The next entry was worse. April 2nd, the garage. CO poisoning is too risky, requires too much setup. The police would look too closely at the ventilation system. Not subtle enough, needs to be simpler. An unfortunate accident. April 18th, the stairs. I loosen the floorboard near the top landing again. If she falls, it looks like a tragic misstep. She often wears those slippery little slippers. I need to make sure I'm at the office when it happens. Perfect alibi. May 1st, the lake house trip. A drowning would be ideal. I'd be seen as the devastated husband. But she's a strong swimmer. The boat would have to capsize unexpectedly. Too dependent on weather and chance. Needs more control. I felt the bile rise in my throat. The loose floorboard, the unseasonable heating failure, the insistence on the life insurance. Every strange moment from the past 6 months was suddenly slotting into place, not as unfortunate accidents, but as deliberate, failed attempts on my life. My husband wasn't just planning my death, he was rehearsing it. I wasn't reading fiction. I was reading a meticulous, cold-blooded plan for my murder, and I realized that the whispering frost had turned into a full-blown blizzard of terror. Michael was coming home in 2 days, and if I didn't act immediately, I would be next week's unfortunate accident. I didn't move for what felt like an hour. The black leather diary felt scalding hot in my hands, though my own skin was clammy and ice cold. I wasn't just in danger, I was living with a meticulous killer. Michael wasn't some impulsive man driven by temporary madness. He was methodical. That was the most terrifying realization of all. His accounting background, the very thing I admired, was what made him a brilliant, patient predator. I finally managed to crawl off the floor and lock the study door. My first instinct was to run, to sprint out of the house and never look back. But my second, calmer instinct reminded me of the diary's content. It must look natural. I cannot be implicated. If I just disappeared, Michael would play the devastated husband and the police would assume a missing person case, or maybe even suicide. The $3 million policy would still pay out. I couldn't just escape. I had to prove his intentions. I needed to trap him. The diary was the key. I had to secure every single page. I went back to the ledger, forcing myself to read every entry, mapping out his failed attempts and his future ideas. The latest entry was dated yesterday, just before he left for his supposed business trip. June 14th, the car. The brake line is too easy to trace, too aggressive. The fall looks more like fate, but she keeps avoiding the stairs. Next trip, I will suggest a hike near the canyon, a tragic slip on a narrow, unfamiliar path. I'll make sure she's a little tipsy. Perfect alibi, devastating grief, no evidence. The canyon. We had a trip planned in 3 weeks to the Rocky Mountains. I hadn't even thought about the itinerary yet, but he had planned my murder to happen on our next vacation. The next crucial step was gathering evidence. I grabbed my phone and began photographing every page of the diary, every chilling detail, every date, every failed method. I even took a close-up photo of the unique imprint the pen left on the paper. I then immediately uploaded all the photos to a secure, encrypted cloud drive. That Michael had absolutely no access to digital proof was essential. Next, I needed physical proof of his earlier attempts. I crept upstairs to the landing. I carefully located the loose floorboard he had mentioned. It was expertly done. It looked solid, but if you stepped on the exact outer edge, it tilted just enough to throw off your balance near the railing. I managed to pry it up slightly and took a high-resolution video showing how the screws had been deliberately loosened. My heart pounded as I worked, worried that a neighbor might see me or that Michael might call I was a potential murder victim, acting like a detective in her own home. I knew I couldn't call the police yet. If I called now, they would question Michael, and he would immediately claim the diary was fiction or a sick prank, or that I was having a mental breakdown. He was an accountant with a flawless public reputation. I needed undeniable proof beyond the diary that showed intent and action I had to get out. But I also had to make it look like a spontaneous departure, not a panicked flight. I quickly packed a small suitcase, only essentials, cash, and the diary itself, which I tucked deep inside a false bottom of my bag. I was leaving the physical diary as a trump card. If he discovered it missing, he'd know I knew, and he'd accelerate his plan. Before leaving, I had to cover my tracks. I carefully cleaned the study floor, leaving no trace of the spilled coffee or my intrusion. I sent Michael a casual, loving text. "Miss you, darling. The house feels empty. Can't wait for you to be back tomorrow night." I hated the nauseating lie, but it was necessary to maintain the illusion of my trusting ignorance. I left the house under the cover of dusk, the two golden retrievers looking confused as I locked the door behind me. I didn't drive my car. He tracked the GPS on it I called a rideshare service from a burner phone I kept for emergencies, directing the driver to a large, busy downtown hotel where anonymity was guaranteed. As I settled into the sterile, impersonal hotel room, I finally allowed myself to breathe, but the fear was still a suffocating pressure. I was safe for the moment, but Michael would be home tomorrow evening. He would find his diary untouched, he thought, and he would continue with his meticulous planning, oblivious that I was miles away, reading the next chapter of my own murder story. I had only one person I could trust, my older sister, Amelia. Amelia was a tough-as-nails investigative journalist, cynical and smart. She knew Michael disliked her because she was always asking too many probing questions about his finances. I called her immediately, tears finally stinging my eyes. "Amelia, I'm at the Sheraton downtown. I'm safe, but I need you to come now. Michael is trying to kill me." Her immediate calm response was a lifeline. "I'm on my way, Viv. Don't move. Don't speak to anyone. And most importantly, do not let Michael know you are alive and aware." The game was set. I had the killer's blueprint, the motive, the money, and the knowledge of his next target, the canyon. Now, I just needed my sister's sharp mind to help me build the perfect trap for the man who planned to make my death look like the perfect accident. Amelia arrived at the hotel an hour later. She didn't hug me or offer comfort. She walked in, her face set in a grim, professional mask, carrying a laptop and a large thermos of coffee. That was Amelia, no nonsense, all action. I knew I needed her cold objectivity more than I needed sympathy. "Okay, Viv, start from the beginning, every detail," she commanded, pulling out a small recording device. I recounted the last 7 years, the seemingly perfect marriage, the financial pressures, the bizarre accidents, the life insurance, and finally the discovery of the diary. As I spoke, I showed her the photos and videos I had secretly taken, pausing on the page detailing the canyon trip. Amelia, the veteran journalist who had covered cartel crime and political corruption, remained perfectly still. The only sign of her inner turmoil was the white-knuckle grip she had on her coffee mug. When I finished, she didn't look at me. She looked at the digital evidence. He's an accountant. This level of planning, the alibis, the methods, it's terrifyingly rational. It's not a crime of passion, Vivian. It's a transaction, and we need to treat it like a major investigative piece. Amelia immediately shifted into planning mode, outlining a three-pronged strategy: legal protection, financial investigation, and the trap. First, legal protection. We can't go to the police yet with just the diary, she stressed. They'll treat it as circumstantial evidence from a distressed wife. We need an experienced lawyer to file a temporary restraining order, TRO, against Michael immediately, citing severe marital distress and credible threats of bodily harm. The goal isn't to arrest him now, but to legally separate you and ensure he can't access you or your assets. Second, financial investigation. Why does he need $3 million now? Accountants don't usually resort to murder unless the hole is far deeper than a few bad investments. I need to know the true state of his firm's finances. I have contacts in forensic accounting. We need to find the specific debt or the fraudulent transaction that pushed him over the edge. That's the motive the police will believe. Third, the trap, the canyon. We need to use his own plan against him. He's coming home tonight believing you're still the naive wife. We let him think the canyon trip is still on. But first, we need undeniable proof that he has acted on the diary's plans. Amelia pulled out her laptop and accessed a restricted database. We need to know what he's been doing on his business trip. Every hotel, every rental car, every credit card transaction. Within hours, Amelia's contacts provided us with a preliminary sketch of Michael's financial maneuvers. He hadn't been on a business trip. He'd been in a small, isolated cabin about 100 miles away, rented under a false name. More alarmingly, his credit card showed two specific purchases made the day before: a high-powered industrial-grade winch and several hundred feet of specialized, thin nylon climbing rope, the kind used for scaling, not for casual hiking. The winch and the rope, Amelia said, tapping the screen, her eyes narrowed. He's not planning a slip, Viv. He's planning to secure himself, then stage a rappel accident or use the winch to drag you over the edge. It's premeditated murder with specialized equipment. The purchases were the action we needed. They connected the theoretical plan in the diary to a physical, tangible attempt. Now we could go to the police, but Amelia insisted on one final crucial piece of evidence. We need his confession, or at least a highly incriminating statement, she stated. When he calls, you need to be ready. We will set up a ghost line, a temporary number routed through a voice modulator that can also record the entire conversation with absolute clarity. You need to sound upset but not hysterical. You need to get him to talk about the insurance and the canyon trip. I felt a surge of fear, but also determination. What do I say? You tell him you're worried about the insurance money because you've had a bad dream. Say you want to cancel the policies before the trip. That will panic him. He'll have to reassure you, confirm the trip, and perhaps accidentally confirm his motive. That evening, we moved into a new, undisclosed location, a fortified safe house provided by Amelia's company, complete with state-of-the-art recording equipment. We watched the clock tick down to Michael's scheduled arrival home. He would find my vague, nervous note saying I was out with friends and would start panicking when I didn't answer his calls. At 8:30 p.m., the phone finally rang. My heart felt like a trapped bird. I looked at Amelia, who gave me a silent, encouraging nod. I picked up the ghost line, ready to talk to the man who was meticulously planning the last moments of my life. The recording light on the system Amelia had set up was blinking steadily. Michael's name flashed across the screen. I took a deep, steadying breath and answered, forcing my voice to sound exactly like a woman on the verge of tears, overwhelmed by financial stress, but still trusting. Michael? Where are you? Why aren't you answering? I'm so worried, I whispered into the phone. His voice on the other end was a carefully manufactured mixture of relief and irritation. Vivian! God, I've been calling for hours. I thought something terrible happened. Where are you? Why did you leave? I'm just at a friend's house. I needed space, Michael. I was in your study cleaning and I saw the files. The debts. It's worse than you let on, isn't it? I played the distressed wife who had stumbled upon financial ruin. He immediately dropped his guard, moving from the concerned husband to the stressed accountant. Listen, honey, it's bad, but it's manageable. I just need a little more time. You need to come home now. This was my opening. I steered the conversation towards the life insurance, the true motive. I can't manage this stress, Michael. I've been having terrible nightmares since we signed those new insurance forms. I keep dreaming about something awful happening on our trip, and all that money, it just feels cursed. I let out a shaky sob. I want to cancel the policies before we go to the Rockies. I don't want $3 million if it means... The pause on the line was deafening. I could practically hear his mind snapping into panic mode. Canceling the policy meant canceling the entire solution to his colossal debt. His carefully constructed plan was about to collapse. Cancel the policies? Viv, no, don't be ridiculous, he barked, the facade of sympathy momentarily gone, replaced by raw, panicked aggression. You don't understand how important this is. We've put too much into this. Too much into what, Michael? It's just insurance, I insisted, trying to sound genuinely confused and afraid. He lowered his voice, dropping it to a conspiratorial, chilling whisper. It's more than insurance, Viv. It's our way out. The debts are overwhelming. If those investments fail, we lose everything. The house, the cars, everything. This policy is the only guaranteed way to secure your future. You deserve that security, remember? $3 million. Enough to make sure you never have to worry again. But what if something happens to me on the trip? What if I slip on that hiking trail you keep talking about? I don't want you to be alone, I pleaded, pushing him toward the canyon plan. His response was horrifyingly calm. Nothing is going to happen, Viv. It's just a trail, a very isolated trail, yes, but I will be there. I'll make sure it looks like a tragic accident. The police will never suspect me. I have a perfect alibi. You just need to trust me. The trip is in 3 weeks. We cannot cancel that policy now. That policy is your destiny, Vivian. Your destiny. The sheer audacity, the cold, calculated cruelty of the line was staggering. Amelia, listening in through the headphones, made an urgent gesture. Push for the equipment. But I saw the charges, Michael, I said, abruptly changing tack. I saw a massive charge on your work card just before you left. A winch? What do we need a winch and climbing rope for? We're just hiking. Silence. A prolonged, fatal silence. I had hit the nerve. You went through my things. His voice was now pure ice, devoid of any pretense of affection or concern. The mask was completely off. What else did you see, Vivian? Did you see the diary? Is that what this is about? The moment I heard the word diary, I knew we had enough. He wasn't confirming he was writing a book. He was confirming his fear that I had seen the blueprint. "I don't know what you're talking about, Michael," I lied weakly. "Don't you dare lie to me. If you've seen those pages, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know what I have to do. You forced my hand. You should have just stayed out of my business, you stupid, naive idiot," he screamed, the voice of the meticulous accountant entirely replaced by the terrifying rage of a cornered killer clique. Amelia immediately disconnected the line and stopped the recording. I collapsed against the wall, shaking violently. It was over. The recording was pristine. He had confessed to the motive, the money, the planned action, the accident on the trip, and the awareness of his detailed planning, the diary. Amelia was already on the phone with Mrs. Albright, our lawyer, and a detective contact she trusted at the police department. "We have the probable cause, detective. We have a full confession of attempted murder for financial gain, including details of the planned location and the equipment already purchased. The audio file and the financial records are being delivered now." Within the hour, an emergency arrest warrant was issued for Michael Davies. I had survived the terrifying phone call, and more importantly, I had secured the undeniable proof that had been meticulously concealed within the pages of his secret diary. The hunter had walked straight into the trap, built with his own words. The emergency arrest warrant was issued swiftly. Michael, still frantically trying to contact me from his study, was completely blindsided. The police moved with professional precision. Amelia and I watched the local news coverage, our hearts pounding, as two unmarked cars pulled up to our quiet cul-de-sac. Michael was arrested on the front lawn of our house, right next to the prize-winning rose bushes he so meticulously cared for. He was charged with solicitation of murder, attempted aggravated assault, and felony wire fraud for the insurance. The sight of him, the meticulous, respectable accountant, being led away in handcuffs, utterly defeated, was the single most validating moment of my life. The mask had finally shattered. After the arrest, the police immediately secured the house as a crime scene. Amelia and I were escorted back later that night, accompanied by Detective Reynolds, the officer Amelia had contacted, and a forensic team. The goal was simple: retrieve the physical diary and the loose floorboard, confirming the blueprint and the prior attempts. Detective Reynolds was a man of few words, but his expression, a mixture of disgust and professional focus, told me everything. "We have the audio, Mrs. Davies. It's damning, but we need the physical evidence to solidify the premeditation charges." I led the team straight to Michael's study. The room looked exactly as I had left it, sterile, organized, a monument to false control. The tax ledgers were still stacked behind the desk. "It should be behind these ledgers," I whispered, pointing to the exact stack. The detective carefully moved the ledgers, and there it was, the small, black, leather-bound diary. The forensic tech carefully bagged it as physical evidence. Next, we moved to the main staircase. The technician, following my earlier video, located the exact spot on the landing. Using specialized tools, he began to analyze the floorboard. "It's exactly as you described, Mrs. Davies," the technician stated, his voice hushed. "The screws haven't been removed, but they've been meticulously loosened, precisely enough to allow for a dangerous shift if weight is applied to the edge. It was designed to fail." The technician also found faint, microscopic traces of oil and dust inside the screw holes. a forensic confirmation that the loosening was a recent, deliberate act. The loose floorboard, the diary, and the recording. 3 pieces of evidence that connected Michael's intent to his action. While the forensic team worked, Amelia and I went through the rest of the study, armed with a warrant and the knowledge gleaned from the diary. Amelia was searching for the financial motive, the smoking gun that made $3 million a necessity. He wouldn't risk murder for something trivial, Viv, Amelia muttered, scanning a row of locked file cabinets. He was desperate. Desperation this deep is usually tied to a gigantic, imminent deadline. Then Amelia hit the jackpot. Hidden behind a fake partition in the filing cabinet, she found a series of loan agreements and foreclosure notices from an aggressive private lender, not a bank. "Look at this," Amelia said, her finger tracing a number on a document. He didn't just lose money, he was involved in a highly risky, unregulated real estate scheme that went belly up. He personally guaranteed a loan of $7 million due in 30 days. The $7 million debt was the real monster. The $3 million insurance payout was never intended to set me up for life. It was barely enough to mitigate his own financial ruin and save his reputation from being publicly disgraced by a colossal failed gamble. The murder wasn't just about money, it was about saving his career and his meticulously crafted image. The foreclosure notice date, July 1st, was the terrifying deadline. The canyon trip was scheduled for mid-July. He needed me dead, the claim processed, and the money in his account before the foreclosure date hit. The urgency explained the rushed planning and his aggressive attempts. The police also searched the garage, finding the industrial winch and the specialized climbing rope, exactly as detailed on the receipts Amelia had tracked. The tools were now officially linked to the crime scene and the planned attempt. As the police finished securing the evidence, Detective Reynolds looked at me. "Mrs. Davies, thank you for your incredible bravery and composure. If you hadn't kept your wits about you, we would likely be investigating a very different case next month. You saved your own life." Leaving the house, I felt a strange mix of profound grief and victorious relief. The house, our perfect dream home, now felt like a mausoleum of lies. But I was walking out of it alive, carrying the cold, hard proof that the man I loved was a monster, and that I was strong enough to bring him down. With Michael in custody, the legal battle shifted from securing evidence to controlling the narrative. Michael's high-priced legal team, hired by his remaining creditors, immediately launched a smear campaign designed to discredit me and dismiss the diary as meaningless. The defense's claim was audacious and sickening. The diary is merely a form of creative writing, a therapeutic exercise for a deeply stressed professional, Mrs. Davies, under severe emotional distress due to the family's financial turmoil, misinterpreted her husband's morbid fiction as reality. They painted me as the hysterical wife, suffering a mental breakdown trying to extort money from an innocent, well-respected community member. They even tried to suggest that I had tampered with the floorboard and planted the winch to frame him, fueled by the stress of potential foreclosure. This was Amelia's domain. She had anticipated this exact defense. "He's trying to hide behind the veil of white-collar respectability, Viv," Amelia explained, pacing the floor of Mrs. Albright's conference room. "But we have the timing. We have the motive, and now we need to show the jury the real Michael Davies." Mrs. Albright immediately filed the official motion to introduce the financial documents. The $7 million loan, the foreclosure notice, and the massive last-minute life insurance policy upgrade as proof of the motive. The financial desperation made the murder plan plausible, stripping the fiction claim of its credibility. But the best weapon remained Amelia's journalistic reach. We needed to counter the defense's narrative with the brutal, undeniable truth. "The public needs to hear your voice, Viv," Amelia stated, not as the hysterical victim, but as the composed survivor who fought back. "We'll arrange an exclusive interview with a major network, one that is known for digging deep into white-collar crime." I was hesitant. The thought of facing the cameras, of having my pain dissected on national television, was terrifying. But I knew it was the only way to safeguard the jury pool and prevent Michael from escaping justice. The interview was arranged for the following week. I spent days with Amelia rehearsing my answers, focusing on the facts, the 7 years of marriage, the sudden shift in his demeanor, the insurance, and the meticulous details in the diary that transcended fiction. When the cameras finally rolled, I looked directly into the lens. I didn't cry. I spoke clearly, calmly, and with crushing certainty. "Michael Davies didn't write a novel," I began, holding up the photograph of the diary's March 14th entry. "He wrote a blueprint for my murder. He didn't write about loose floorboards. He physically loosened them right by our main staircase. He didn't write about buying equipment. He bought an industrial winch and rope, which the police found in our garage, specifically for the canyon trip he planned." I showed them the proof of the $7 million debt. This was his motive, not stress but greed. He was facing public disgrace and ruin. The $3 million insurance payout was his escape plan, and I was just a line item on his ledger. The interview went viral within hours. The image of the composed wife holding up the killer's own words was powerful. The public opinion shifted instantly and irreversibly. Michael Davies was no longer the stressed accountant writing dark fiction. He was the convicted killer-to-be in the eyes of the nation. Meanwhile, Mrs. Albright filed a civil suit against Michael and his firm, not just for spousal fraud and attempted murder, but for the profound psychological trauma inflicted. The goal was twofold: to seize every remaining asset and to ensure he spent the rest of his life financially accountable for his actions. During this intense period, I also began the process of cleaning out my life. I changed all my accounts, filed for divorce, and sold the house, the perfect home that had nearly become my tomb. Every piece of furniture, every memory felt contaminated by his calculated presence. But the nightmare wasn't quite over. Just before his preliminary hearing, Michael managed to send me one last chilling message, routed through his lawyer's encrypted email system, intended solely to frighten me. The message was short, but it confirmed his continuing malice. "I still have the original copy of the key. I was planning to use it in the trunk of the car. The key is in a safe deposit box. You haven't found everything, Viv." The key. The trunk. I felt a renewed wave of icy fear. What key? What other plan? His claim that I hadn't found everything was a final, desperate attempt to maintain control and sow fear. The legal system had him physically, but he still thought he held a mental piece of the puzzle. I immediately tasked Amelia and a private investigator to track down any safe deposit box linked to Michael, knowing that even in defeat, the monster was still planning. Michael's threat had settled over me like a shadow. I still have the original copy of the key. I was planning to use it in the trunk of the car. The key is in a safe deposit box. You haven't found everything, Viv." This message proved how much Michael, even in jail, feared losing control, but it also confirmed he was holding on to one last secret. In a killer's mind, key and trunk always meant something sinister. I immediately held a meeting with Amelia and Mrs. Albright. While Mrs. Albright dismissed the message as Michael's final, desperate psychological attack, Amelia and I refused to take the risk. Amelia tasked a trusted private investigator, PI, team with scrutinizing all of Michael's bank and post office box records from the last few years. After a week of intense searching, the PI returned with a lead. Michael had rented a safe deposit box at a small, anonymous bank in the city's industrial district. Registered under the name of one of his shell companies, Mrs. Albright immediately applied for a search warrant. The judge, citing Michael's current charges and his attempt to tamper with evidence, quickly approved the order. Amelia, Mrs. Albright, and I went to the bank. My heart hammered with the same frantic rhythm as when I first found the diary. What could Michael's final move be? When the box was opened, contrary to my fears of finding an explosive or a direct threat, it held only 3 items: a shiny silver custom-made key. It looked designed for a specialized lock, not a standard door. A small piece of paper with the inscription, "Project MK," a set of coordinates and a rough sketch. "Project MK," Amelia murmured, closely examining the paper. That's a code. Could MK stand for Michael Klein or Michael Kim, an accomplice? We immediately sent the coordinates to the PI within 2 hours. The answer came back. The coordinates pointed to a dilapidated storage facility far outside the city. Registered to an old shipping company, Michael's firm didn't officially use the car trunk. The key, the storage unit, all the pieces fit. When we arrived at the storage facility, escorted by the police and the PI team, we had a makeshift garage opened in the abandoned area. Inside was a dusty, old sports car, a classic vehicle Michael had claimed to have scrapped years ago, a car that held sentimental value. The police officer tried Michael's key on the trunk lock click. The lock opened. The officer opened the trunk. Inside, there was neither a body nor a weapon, as we might have feared. Instead, there was a thick, old-fashioned, handwritten ledger that took up half the trunk, the ultimate ledger. This ledger was a document that eclipsed the previous diary's psychopathological plans. It was the physical record of his real-life financial crimes, prepared in case his defense lawyers ever managed to successfully argue the first diary was fiction. The details in the ledger went far beyond the $7 million debt. This was a record of 10 years of bank fraud, embezzlement, and systematic theft from investment funds. Dating back to the very beginning of his career, the first diary planned a future murder. This ledger proved dozens of past financial crimes. Most shockingly, one entry detailed the name and location of a former business partner who had disappeared years ago after a major investment scheme collapsed. The note suggested that the partner's disappearance was directly linked to Michael's actions. Project MK was likely the initials of this former partner. This ledger completely destroyed Michael's legal defense. He was no longer a stressed writer. He was a sophisticated, organized criminal who had been running a network of fraud for a decade. Mrs. Albright immediately handed the ledger over to federal prosecutors. With this new evidence, Michael was charged not only with attempted murder, but also with decades of bank fraud, money laundering, and defrauding multiple high-profile investors. Michael's trial was fast-tracked under the weight of the new charges. The prosecutor gave Michael no quarter, and he faced the very real prospect of a life sentence. In the courtroom, I finally looked into his eyes. For the first time, I saw the terror behind the perfect mask. There was no hatred or anger, just the absolute emptiness of a man who had lost all control. I was no longer afraid. Michael Davies's downfall was not just complete, it was absolute. His legal team, unable to argue against a 10-year handwritten ledger detailing his financial crimes, advised him to take a plea deal. However, the prosecution, armed with the attempted murder confession, the physical evidence, the winch, the floorboard, the diaries, and the scale of the financial theft, refused to show leniency. The trial lasted 3 intense weeks. I testified on the first day, walking the jury through the diary entries and the terrifying phone call. I was calm, articulate, and utterly convincing. I showed them the man who meticulously tracked his debt and planned his wife's death with the same cold detachment he used for quarterly reports. The jury took less than 4 hours to return a verdict of guilty on all counts: criminal solicitation of murder, attempted aggravated assault, felony wire fraud, and numerous counts of financial fraud. At the sentencing hearing, the judge addressed Michael directly. "Mr. Davies, you planned the murder of your wife not out of passion, but out of financial calculation. You sought to trade your wife's life for financial gain, maintaining a facade of respectability while perpetrating crimes of immense proportion. This court must ensure that this level of narcissistic criminality is completely removed from society." Michael Davies was sentenced to life imprisonment with no possibility of parole for 25 years. The man who had planned my death for a $3 million payout lost everything: his freedom, his reputation, and his life. The months following the sentencing were dedicated to rebuilding Mrs. Albright successfully finalize the divorce, ensuring I was financially independent and securing a substantial portion of the defrauded funds as compensation for psychological trauma and damages. I retained nothing from the house, the physical memories too tainted by his presence. The most unexpected gift of this entire ordeal was the strengthened bond with Amelia. She was not just my sister, she was the architect of my survival, my unwavering protector. She helped me navigate the media frenzy and the quiet, painful process of healing. I relocated to a small, quiet coastal town, a place far from the suburban nightmare Michael had created. I changed my last name back to my maiden name. I found a new career, one that allows me to help others dealing with complex betrayals. I no longer fear the dark. My fear was replaced by the knowledge that I stared down a killer, armed myself with his own words, and brought down his entire empire. I realized that Michael's meticulous nature was his fatal flaw. He planned everything perfectly, except for one variable: my strength. I learned a profound truth. When a monster lives in your home, you don't run. You arm yourself with the truth, and you wait for the moment to strike. The diary was meant to document my death, but instead it became the undisputed record of my survival and his final destruction. My life is mine again, and that freedom is worth more than all the insurance money in the world. Thank you for listening to this difficult confession. We are so grateful to share these stories with you. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments section below.